So, it's November the 5th. I always remember the date. November the 5th, 2005, around about lunchtime. Suddenly, there's shouting. The temple is on fire. Now, at this time, the main buildings of Gyokuruchi, our home temple in Japan, are in the shape of an L. One side of the L is the main Hondo, the main Buddha hall, where people would meditate and the chanting would happen and so on. Next to that was a tea ceremony room. And then the other side of the L had a couple of guest rooms. It had the main temple office, the bathrooms, the kitchen, dining area, and Shinzen Roshi's office and bedroom. So the kitchen area is at one end of the L, and this is where the fire seems to have started. So the first thing you need to know is that October, November is the driest time of the year in Japan. The fire is happening very fast. It seems to have started in the kitchen area. Now, the ground floor is you've got the kitchen. This is one end of the L. Upstairs is where Shinzen Roshi's room is, where he's got his bed, but also where he actually does most of his work. We all start rushing about. We get everybody outside. We're getting buckets going. We're getting a hose on it. But this fire is very fast. The wind is sufficiently strong that it's fanning the flames quite effectively. The fire is engulfing a lean-to, which is right next to the kitchen. There's a dog in there. I get the door open, I try to get in, and the whole place is surrounded by flames, and it's kind of hot, hot enough to start kind of tearing the skin off your face. And the dog is cowering at the back corner of the room. I just can't get in. I can't get the dog, and we lose him. We've got all the humans out. We're getting, water on the flames, but it's just not working. The flames are not only surrounding the kitchen, but they're going up as well, onto the floor above. Shinzen Roshi sees what's happening, sees his room starting to catch, and he runs into the building, up the very steep, old-fashioned Japanese stairs to the first floor, down the corridor to his room. Now, I've done some fire study back in the day, and I know that smoke and fumes are what tend to kill people. Very few people burn to death. And I run in after him, kind of determined that even if we lose the temple, we're not going to lose him. So anyway, he's run into his room, grabbed his computer. So I'm running down the corridor, I take it out of his hands, and then run to the top of the stairs to bring it down. And then I realize he's gone back into his room. So I leave it at the top of the stairs. The stairs are very steep. It's slow going down them. And he's gone back into his room again. So my primary job, as I see it, is to stay close to him. So I run back up the corridor, and he's got his backup discs or something like that, I think. I grab them out of his hands. Again, run down the corridor, drop them off at the top of the stairs. He's gone back again. So we're going backwards and forwards like this. He keeps on bringing out more stuff, but I haven't got time to get any of it down because the fire is surrounding his room. The smoke's getting thicker. It gets to the point where it's just really, really dangerous. And I grab him. I say, "We've got to get out of here. We've got to get out of here, Roshi." So I sort of bundle him down the stairs. And the flames have surrounded everything so intensely that I'm not able to get back in the building, get up the stairs to get his stuff. Not a single thing. There's not been literally a moment or a second to get any of it. So anyway, we're by this time the local volunteer fire brigade is showing up. It's a Saturday, if I remember rightly. So fortunately, most of them are available, with it being a weekend and so on. They take quite a while to get themselves all geared up, and they're terribly concerned that it is a dry time of year, that the flames are going to jump across from the buildings onto the mountainside, start catching the trees alight, and have the whole mountain alight. So when they finally do get the hoses going, they're partly using them to protect the mountain and only partly to extinguish the flames on the buildings. Now, we have a Brazilian, I think he was Brazilian, guest at the time who was running around taking photos. So there are some photos of all this going on. Not all that many, but some. Give you a bit of a sense of what's going on. So anyway, we're all working like mad, doing what we can, trying to really stop the fire going around the corner. So the first side of the L, you know, it's just engulfing. It's just going so quickly, but getting it round the corner into the Hondo, into the Buddha Hall, the tea room and so on, that's what we're trying to stop. We're trying to essentially save the second half of the building. Now, the fire is going through the roof space. Literally inside the Hondo, you can see almost like rain, flames kind of pouring like rain through from the ceiling onto the tatamis on the floor. But, you know, the fire brigade's really got going by now. You know, we're doing a bit, and, you know, it's all slowing down. And in the middle of all this, you know, rushing about and working on this and everything, Shinzen Roshi walks behind me and he says 4 words in English: everything gone but okay. You know, all his stuff, everything that he owned has gone. Nevertheless, he literally didn't miss a beat with all this. He just did what needed to happen. Now, so the fire comes under control eventually, dies down. Now, the next morning, at this point, we have a community of about 12 people living in the temple, small temple community. The next morning, for morning practice, the only 2 people who show up are Shinzen Roshi and myself. And he says very pointedly, as we're there, the Hondo is kind of still full of smoke. There's scorched tatamis everywhere. There's blue tarpaulins wrapping bits and pieces up. It's a real mess. And he says very pointedly, I need a successor. Now, one of the things about Shinzen Roshi, like many Japanese people, is he was very fond of taking photos at certain points in his life. In the main office, not in his room, but in the adjoining main temple office, he had a whole series of photo albums. Now, the next day, it's incredible. This fire has been surgical, really, in its destruction. Everything is gone. When he said everything gone, it literally was. Everything was gone, except these photos didn't burn. So there's a kind of an ash field where the buildings had been, and floating on this ash field were these kind of memories of his life, scorched and singed, but still visible. It was very poignant. And our next day, the job was essentially to clear up all this stuff. Now, I did actually find within the destruction, I found a couple of tea bowls which had been kind of, if you like, fired all over again. The glaze had kind of crackled and melted and burned on them. So they were very sort of poignant. I still have one of them, actually. Very poignant kind of souvenirs of this disaster. But apart from the photos, the tea bowls, it literally was everything gone. Now, it came out the next day or a couple of days later that the Fukujushoku, the second in charge in the temple, who was a very busy guy, very, very nice person, he had a lot of the admin jobs at the time, and he'd forgotten to renew the building insurance for that year. So there was no insurance coverage. Now, this period immediately after the fire was one of great suspicion, fear, paranoia. Why? Well, one of the things that Shinzen Roshi had been very actively involved with was the cult members from Aum Shinrikyo, this terrible death cult, really, which had been releasing poison gas on the Tokyo subway, had been murdering people, had been stockpiling arms, had been trying to buy nuclear waste on the open international market and so on. Really, really dark. When this Aum Shinrikyo story broke, people in Japan were terrified of the members of this cult. Now, the vast bulk of the members of the cult were just spiritual seekers who had no idea really about all of this stuff. They just thought they were practicing yoga and meditation and so on. But they had extraordinary difficulty in kind of reintegrating into Japanese society. People were terrified of them. People thought that they were kind of like the bogeyman. They were more feared and reviled than any kind of mafia people or anything like that. So one of the things that Shinzen Roshi did was he let people come, ex-cult members come, stay at the temple as a kind of a halfway house, and then go on to, to restart their lives, to re-enter society, to get jobs and all this kind of thing. And so after this fire, there were, the rumor mills were absolutely in overdrive. Was it members of Aum Shinrikyo? Because it still exists even to this day in very attenuated form. But had they come to burn the place out as a kind of a revenge because he's helping people to leave? Or on the other hand, was it enemies of Aum Shinrikyo who were, taking their revenge? Nobody really knew, there was a lot of fear that people were going to come back and burn the rest down in the night, all this kind of thing. So it wasn't until the fire brigade investigation happened a little bit later still that they were able to work out that we had a little boy staying in the temple, 11 years old or so. But he had a kind of a growth defect. So he actually, although he was 11, had what appeared to be the body and also the mind of about a 5 or 6 year old, really quite young. And his parents had asked if he could come and stay at the temple because he wasn't really fitting in the school system, as a way of, finding a place where he could have a structure and get some country air and some food and this kind of thing. Anyway, he'd found some matches and he'd been making a whole series of little fires here and there, and it just so happened that one of them was close to the kitchen, and with the wind being the direction it had jumped across and everything had caught. Now, when his parents showed up a day or two later, they were, of course, incredibly apologetic. Shinzen Roshi wouldn't accept a penny from them. So off went the little boy. Now, the Fukujushoku, the second in charge of the temple, obviously, we were all pretty worried about him because this is a situation in which somebody might just do something suicidal, in Japanese culture. So we kind of watched him very carefully over the next little while, but basically he didn't do anything desperate, but he did end up leaving quite soon afterwards and went off to become a farmer up in northern Japan. And I hope he's doing well. He's a great guy, great guy. It was really a shame what happened. A very honest mistake. Very, very busy person, you know, very easy to miss these things. So anyway, that was November the 5th. Very soon after this, we had a pretty heavy-duty winter kick in. And initially we had no water supply, we had no kitchen, no bathhouse. You know, we were really reduced down accommodation-wise. Things were pretty tough. And over that winter, we went from about 12 people or so down to about 5. People found sick grandmothers they had to look after, and, you know, various other things. And you know, off they went in various directions. And so really, it was after that Shinzen Roshi was starting to talk about myself as becoming his successor. And it wasn't so long after that he made me Fukuju Shoku, the sort of vice abbot of the place, and so it remained until he named me his successor, and I came back to the UK. So that fire, November the 5th, that was a big turning point in many ways. And one of the things that was, for me, most poignant was that moment when he walks behind me and says, "Everything gone, but okay." And actually evidenced that in his subsequent behavior. Everything was gone, and he just carried straight on. It didn't change anything, it didn't stop anything. We're very fortunate to have a teacher like this in our background.